When she addressed, the sad lady of the imperial palace came down with all the ladies and maidens, and with the steps hastened by the anguish she felt, she went to the church where Trnt's body lay. She stepped to the top of the great cenotaph, and when she saw Trnt's body, she felt her heart would break, and yet passion lifted her spirit, and she went over to his bed with warm tears flowing from her eyes, and threw herself upon Trnt's body. The suffering woman kissed his cold body. Everyone heard her weep and shed great tears of grief. Then she said, I want to go looking for the soul of the one who was my Trnt in the blessed places where it rests. I do not want to keep you company in death, since in life, where I loved you so much, I have not been able to serve you. Oh, you ladies and maidens, do not cry. Save your tears for a more opportune time. It's enough for me to cry and lament, since these are my sorrows. When she had said these words, she fell upon the body in a faint. She was quickly lifted away from the body, and the doctors helped her regain her consciousness. When she had recovered her senses, the lady again threw herself upon the body, kissing Trnt's cold mouth. She tore at her hair and clothing, along with the skin of her breasts and her face, this sad lady, more grievous than any other. Stretched out on his body, she kissed his cold mouth, mixing her warm tears with Trnt's cold ones. She wanted to talk, but could not, and she knew no words sad enough to express her grief. With trembling hands, she opened Trnt's eyes, which she kissed first with her mouth, and then filled with all the tears flowing from her own eyes. And it seemed as though Trnt, while dead, was crying for the grief of the living Carmenisa. And she was crying blood, for she had exhausted all her tears. So she cried all over his body, she who had lost everything to him who had lost his life for her, and with words that would be enough to break precious stones, diamonds, and steel itself, she cried grievously. Don't think, my soul, that I will keep you from Trnt for long. I will give burial to your body and to mine. The dead bodies will be embraced in one grave, and together we will share the same glory in heaven. The emperor, distressed by his daughter's words, said, My daughter, sorrow and tears will never end. My good knights, pick her up and take her to my palace and leave her in her chambers, either by her consent or by force. And so it was done. Her father, desperate, went with her, saying, My daughter, you are a lady of all I possess. Do not go to such an extreme, for your grief is death to me. Stop your crying and put on a happy face for the people to see. The princess answered, O Emperor, my lord, life-giver of this miserable daughter, your majesty truly wants to console my grief. Oh, poor me, I cannot hold back my tears. When the poor father saw his daughter and the other women crying, he could not bear to remain in her chamber, and with his terrible anguish he left. Then the princess sat on the bed and said, Come, my faithful maidens, and help me undress, for there will be time enough to cry. And she prepared her body in the most comely way she could, and said, I am the Infantata who hope to rule over the entire empire of Greece. It is my duty to move everyone here to grief and compassion for the death of the virtuous and blessed knight Trnt LeBlanc. O my Trnt, out of grief for your death, let our right hand wound our breasts, and tear our faces so that our misery will be so much greater. For you were our shield and the shield of the whole empire. O sword of virtue, great was the sorrow that was prepared for us. And don't think, Trnt, that I have wiped you from my memory. As long as I am alive, I will weep for your death. Now, dear maidens, help me to cry this short time that is left of my life, for I cannot remain with you long. The crying and wailing was so great that it made the entire city resound. When they saw the princess nearly more dead than alive, they cursed fortune which had brought them such anguish. The doctors came and said she had all the signs of a dying woman. She felt such grief for Trnt's death that blood was coming from her mouth. The grieving empress came into the chamber, knowing that her daughter was not well. When she saw her in that state, she suffered such a shock that she could not speak. When she had recovered, she said, Oh, my daughter, is this the joy and happiness I hoped to have from you? Is this the wedding your father and I and all the people had hoped to be consoled by? Everywhere I turn, I see nothing but grief and sorrow. I see the poor emperor lying on the floor. I see the ladies and maidens, the hair unkempt, their skin covered with blood, their breasts uncovered and scratched, crying through the palace, revealing their grief to everyone. I see the knights and grandees all in mourning, all lamenting, twisting their hands, tearing their hair from their head. What a bitter day, so filled with sadness. I see all the orders of friars coming with pain in their voices, and not one of them can sing. Tell me, what kind of celebration is this for everyone to run from it? Scarcely anyone can talk without a grieving face. Oh, sad is the mother who bears such a daughter. I beg you, my daughter, be happy and put an end to all this sadness. This way you will give consolation to your old and grieving father, and your sad, unfortunate mother, who has raised you so delicately. And she could say no more, such was the grief that held her. How can you, Excellency, tell me, my lady, to find consolation and rejoice if I have lost such a knight who was my husband and lord, and had no equal in the world? Have my protector, my father and lord, come so that he can see my death and my end, so that part of his daughter will be left for him. When the sad father was there, she begged him kindly to sit at one side, and the empress at the other. With her between them, she said these words: I beg you all to have my father confessor come quickly. When he was there, the princess told him, Father, I wish to make a general confession in the presence of all who are here. Then the confessor had her make a general confession, and afterwards he absolved her of all punishment and guilt. When absolution had been granted, the princess asked that the precious body of Jesus Christ be brought to her, and with great devotion and contrition she received it. And all those in the chamber were astonished at the great constancy and firmness of spirit the princess had, and at the many prayers she said before the corpus. There was no heart of steel in the world who, hearing her words, would not have burst into tears. When the princess had given restitution to her soul, she had the emperor's secretary come, and turning to her father, she said, Father and Lord, if it please your majesty, I would like to dispose of my possessions and my soul. The emperor answered, My daughter, I give you my leave to do whatever pleases you, for if I lose you, I lose my life and all good things on this earth. The princess thanked him, and turning to the secretary, she dictated her will. I make as executors of my will, Deiphobus, Duke of Macedonia, and Stephanie, his wife, and I beg and command them to place my body together with Trnt in the place where he will be buried. For, as we will not be able to remain together in life, at least in death our bodies will be united until the end of the world. In addition, all my clothing and jewelry shall be sold, and the proceeds will be given to my maidens for their weddings. As for all the other rights I have in the Greek Empire, I make the empress, my mother, the successor in my place. When the princess had put her possessions and her soul in order, she said farewell to her father, the emperor, kissing his hands and his mouth again and again, and she did the same to her mother, the empress, asking their forgiveness and their blessing with great humility. Oh, unfortunate and miserable me, said the princess. I see the emperor more dead than alive because of me. On the one hand, the death of Trnt pulls me, and on the other, my father's death pulls me. Each of them is winning me over. Her miserable father, his face wet with tears, saw that his daughter was ready to die and could barely speak. He heard her say such painful words and saw all the wailing that was going on in the chamber and throughout the palace. He felt greatly disturbed and was beside himself. He tried to get up from the bed to go out, but he fell to the ground, senseless. They picked him up unconscious and put him on a bed in another chamber, and there he ended his days before his daughter, the princess. Because of the emperor's death, there was a loud wailing, and the news reached the empress and the princess. The empress ran as quickly as she could, but the emperor had already passed from this life. Imagine how the poor lady must have felt to see her husband, her daughter, and her son-in-law all dead. And don't ask me what grief there was in the palace. So much tribulation, all in one day. The princess said, Help me sit down on my bed, and you will hear my words. You all know that with the death of the emperor, my father, I am the successor to the Greek Empire. And so, my knights, I command you, by the allegiance you owe to his majesty the emperor, and now to me, to bring my father's and Trnt's body here to me. And they had to do it. The emperor was put on the right and Trnt on the left, while she was in between them. She kissed her father many times, and Trnt many times more, and she cried in a miserable voice, "Look, knights, you who suffer from love, take note of me and see if I am not fortunate. Oh, on one side I have an emperor, on the other the best knight in the world. Look and see if I should not go into the next world happy, for I will have such good company. Come to me, my loyal sisters and companions, and kiss me one by one. Then you will feel a part of my misery." And they did. First came the Queen of Ethiopia, then the Queen of Fez, then the Duchess of Macedonia, and then all her other maidens, and her mother's maidens. They kissed her hand and her mouth, and they sadly bade the princess farewell, shedding many tears. She had them bring her the cross, and looking at it steadfastly, she said these words with great devotion: "Receive the soul of your servant, O Lord, and free me from infernal bonds and pains. May I feel, O Lord, the blessed rest of heaven and of eternal light, and may I deserve to have among your chosen saints everlasting life and glory. O God, full of pure love and goodness, you who know only how to forgive, grant me, O Lord, that my soul, drawn apart and stripped of earthly vices, may be placed in the company of those redeemed by you. I give myself to you, God who created me." Saying these words, the princess gave up her spirit to her Creator.